Yeah, really think a big thing with the youth guys is having them work on stuff without them even knowing about it. You want to limit the verbal cueing. You do need to verbally cue the kids, but you want to limit the verbal cueing. And I'm talking about in the moment getting a guy better. Now, when it comes to the system and the process that we use, it's completely different from most people that go and look for help at for their 9, 10, 11 year old. And I tell parents every time they come in, whenever I get a 10-year old, they want to come in and they want him to have 4 pitches that he can throw for a strike so he can go out and win plastic trophies.
And then sometimes you nail it. Like a kid walks in the door, you're like, I think this is going to help the kid. And then boom, boom, boom. And that kid's all of a sudden throwing 7 miles an hour harder and feeling great. And you're like, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm that guy.
On the throwing side, I know that my forearm has to maximally contract on each throw to stabilize my elbow joint. So guess what? I'm going to specifically train that.
Fronts, 1-2 on the way.
Hey guys, welcome to the Kova Sports Brick by Brick podcast. My name is TJ Antone. I play for the Cincinnati Reds and also a partner at Kova Sports. This is my co-host Jeremy Kibble, former player for the Reds organization and also an owner at Kova Sports. We bring this podcast to you because we wanted more time with y'all. On Instagram, we were limited with posts and reels and couldn't clearly convey our thoughts and educational content to you at its fullest capacity. We want to bring y'all fresh insight to the game of baseball and player development, from interviews with active players and coaches in the big leagues to our thoughts on how to train future studs. We want this podcast to give you an inside look at the next level of baseball. Episode 2 here today, we're going to dive into training, a topic everyone wants to talk about. We'll touch a little bit on lifting and throwing. I'll be in a way interviewing Kibble today and playing devil's advocate on some of these topics so that we can really understand them and dive into them on a little bit deeper level. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in.
Let's do it.
First question, Kiv, you ready? Are you ready, Kiv?
I am ready. It's all right here.
Hey, before we start, I'm going to grab my coffee.
All right, let's do it.
All right, coffee's grabbed. Now we're ready to go, baby. Let's go.
Let's do it. Yeah, don't edit that out, please.
All right. I won't. I need coffee.
I already had some.
Brought to you by Dutch Bros. I'm in no way sponsored by them, but they're really good coffee. So I love Dutch Bros. Only Dutch out here in Arizona. Really I think they're coming to Texas. So I am in Arizona right now. It's spring training when we're shooting this. As you can see behind me, I'm at a hotel right now. This is the door. And yeah, we're just doing this as we go. So I really appreciate Kibble taking the time to talk a little bit and I really enjoy this so far. It's been a lot of fun. So first thing, let's talk about it. What kind of training do you do at Kova? What kind of training do we do at Kova?
Yeah, so there isn't one answer to this question. We have a couple different avenues of training for guys. We have the specifics inside the skills. So we have hitters and we have throwers. And then there's a million things that go inside of both of those things. And then we also have our strength and conditioning program. And that stuff's going to feed into the skill work. But on the throwing side, we basically use everything, anything and everything, because everything works until it doesn't. And every athlete learns differently. Every athlete retains information differently. Every athlete needs different drills. Every athlete needs different cues. So we implement a lot of different stuff, and really the main thing behind what we're doing is we're just trying to get results with guys. At the end of the day, we want to develop elite level throwers and elite level pitchers. So that fine line there is like with catchers and outfielders and position guys. I want them to be elite level throwers, and then on the pitching side, we want to develop elite level pitchers. So that's when the pitch design stuff comes in, and pitch selection, and even mindset stuff, routine. We touch on everything, but that's the goals behind what we do. First things first, lowest hanging fruit really with a lot of the guys from youth, but let's speak primarily on the high school ages, because that's primarily what we work with is high school players. First things first with a lot of those guys is they just don't move good at all. A lot of them have very inefficient movement patterns. Some of them have really good movement patterns. And those are the guys that, we have to use other things such as different tools like water bags, water balls, footballs, whatever the implement is to help with those really minute specific adjustments. But with the guys that don't move very well, there's typically like a lowest hanging fruit with those guys. With our assessment at Kova, we kind of look at each aspect of the throw. We look at the beginning of the throw, we look at the middle of the throw, and we look at the end of the throw. And some guys, for example, if I look at their movement on the mound, typically, they have really bad loading patterns, or they'll have really bad forward moves from their leg lift. And we'll kind of address those, because typically what you see is if there is inefficiencies early in the throw, that's why there's inefficiencies later in the throw. So, and that's something that we learn over time as coaches too. You kind of look at the whole throw and you see, 10 different things that you can fix. And you can't address it that way. So from experience, I know that if I address stuff that happens early, most of the time the stuff that happens late will fix itself, but not always. Sometimes you still have to address it.
Yeah.
But kind of going back to our assessment, we'll look at where their movement inefficiencies are, and then we'll use our tools and our drills and our cues to attack those.
Yeah. You're 100% correct. Like there's so many different skill levels that come into our gym, it's so fun that happens. You have kids that are elite level throwers already, and you're just trying to squeeze out like 1 or 2 miles an hour, or just help them stay a little bit more healthy. And then you have kids who are on the brink of not making the team, and we're doing our best to try to just raise their level just a little bit, and get them to move better so that 1, they can stay healthier, and 2, they can make the team as well. And I think while on the business side of things, and I say business side because we are running a business, you do have to, in a way, have a blanket or I don't want to say a cookie cutter program, but a way to kind of help everyone, like a system or a process that's going to help everybody. But at the same time, you have to be very particular with what you're giving to each and every athlete along that way, because there's so many different skill levels, so many different age groups. So it's fun, but it's also very hard at times, because you do find yourself, as a coach, trying something. You think a player's ready for a certain type of, workout or drill or whatever, and he is not ready. And you're like, okay, let's go ahead and try this. Or you give something to someone and you see no adaptation or change. And I think that's one of the funnest parts of coaching, and most challenging. And I think that's really what challenges you to become all of us to become better coaches, is using implementation, or using a certain drill, or using a certain lift to try to help a kid. You believe that this drill is going to help this kid. And then you're like, wow, that didn't work at all. Let me go back to the drawing board. Or, wow, that didn't work at all. Let me try step 2 and see if that works. And then sometimes you nail it. Like a kid walks in the door, you're like, I think this is going to help the kid. And then boom, boom, boom. And that kid's all of a sudden throwing 7 miles an hour harder and feeling great. And you're like, yeah, I'm that guy. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. I think, and it's fun, just learning constantly. But I think you're right. Like there's so many different skill levels. There has to be a lot of different ways to attack these weaknesses. And I think attacking weaknesses is one of the first things we do at Kova. Is like, what is the lowest hanging fruit? What are we going to see change with first? A lot of kids want to come in and work on their curveball, do pitch design. And we have kind of a hierarchy of the way we attack kids. And that is movement efficiency, and then push velocity, and then we develop secondary pitches, and then we develop command and proficiency with those secondary pitches, along with kind of like sequencing and stuff like that, and that kind of goes into pitching mastery. So there's definitely a stepping stool, or like a steps leading up to like building good pitchers. But I also like that you touched on, we're not just like a pitching facility. We have a lot of kids that are outfielders or infielders or catchers that come in and they just want to throw harder. And I tell kids all the time, they're like, "Hey, do you do, catchers?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Like, we do throwing programs for catchers as well, because no matter what position you are on the field, you have to be able to throw the ball hard. Like, throwing the ball hard will help you from any position on the field. That helps your team. Like, the bang bang plays are now in your favor. You're feeling better. There's outfielders that they throw a lot from the outfield. I mean, they're throwing maximum effort. They catch a ball they haven't thrown in about 15 minutes. They run out there, they play a little catch in the inning, and then, oh, man on second plays the plate. 1-run game. We got to get this guy out. So we're catching the ball, we're crow hopping, and we're going. And like, we got to help every position on the field. And I love that. I love when other positions come in. I love working with pitchers as well, but I also love working with catchers and position players and outfielders, because it's really fun to kind of see it, something that we do as pitchers also work on for other positions as well.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the reason why it works is because throwing is throwing. If you get into good positions, you're going to throw harder. For example, a lot of times with the position guys, it's a lot of arm action stuff. They were taught, to point the ball or like go straight to the ear, and they just don't have great feel or positioning with their throwing. So like almost instantly, if I can get an outfielder, like, and typically they'll come in and they'll have inverted W, their hand will be late, and I'll use, some specific drills to get them to feel the positioning and then the feel of like getting there in a loose and relaxed manner. And like instantly, like 3 days into it, they go 4 or 5 miles an hour instantly. And it's because we have these principles around movement at Kova. I know that if my pelvis is open and my arm is up in a deep position, I'm going to throw harder.
100%.
And the only reason why I know that to be fact is because I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again, nonstop. So that gives me confidence as a coach too. Like, if I fix this guy's throwing harder.
Yes.
And if he throws harder, then he creates opportunities for himself. And here we are with an outfielder that throws 95 from the outfield.
Yeah.
And that's a big bonus.
That's a huge bonus. Yep. So yeah, I think you nailed it right there. Let's talk a little bit about blending, because we were talking about this on the phone the other day, and we have specific drills, like you said, like say a guy has an inverted W, and we give him a specific drill to try to fix that. It can help with just doing the one drill, but how do you get him to do those changes on the mound, or how do you get him to do those changes when he's actually throwing a ball? Because that is the actual thing that's important. We can have him a kid in the gym and have him do the drill perfectly over and over and over, but then he goes and to throw a baseball and that elbow is climbing up again. So it's like, how do you blend from drill to game speed?
Oh, I want to compare this to working out, because I feel like a lot of people can understand this concept. If I'm drilling a movement pattern in a squat, right, and I have a sub-maximal load on the bar, and I'm hitting certain positions in my squat, I can do that. I can learn, I can slow it down a little bit, and I can, load into my posterior chain. I can get into a good position at the bottom of my squat, and I can drive through the floor, right? But when I get into a maximal effort lift, a lot of stuff goes out the window, and it's the same thing with throwing. I don't want to be good at drills. I want to be good at performing the actual task I'm asking my body to do. So like you said, there is a process in blending, right? I look at it like, depending on the athlete, there's steps, right? So I like to boil it down into two things with guys. The first thing is the positioning. Where are we trying to get, right? If I try to throw the whole cow at them at once, they don't get it. And it never works, especially with a lower level athlete. So positioning, for instance, if it's arm action, I will show them their video with their hand down at front foot strike. And I will show them actively driving into their scap, that's not what we want to do. So instead of going right in and throwing the whole pal at them at once, like, hey, this is where we want to get. Here's a very, very simple drill, and let's get there over and over and over again. Once that's established, check, we got the positioning. Okay, what's the second step? I'm not throwing it like this. I'm not throwing slow. I'm moving fast when I throw fast. So the second step is going to be the feel into those positions, right? So that's like equivalent to me loading some weight on the bar. I got to feel the tension. I got to create tension, right? It's the same thing with throwing, but it's opposite. There's no tension. It's all relaxation. So from there, once the positioning is dialed in, I'll give them a blending drill where maybe they'll pause there, but they'll flow. So for example, like a figure eight with the arm action, I'll have them do figure eights and then kind of get into that vertical forearm position and then throw. And then once they can get there in a loose, relaxed manner and with a pause, it's like, okay, check. Now can we get there without a pause? Right. So then it's a figure eight drill, and then hand flips up, and then we go. And that's kind of the process.
That is the process. Yeah. I saw this skill acquisition graph one time.
Skill execution.
Yeah. Essentially, it was like a skill execution graph. And it was like the demand. If you have an athlete that has pretty low skill level and you ask them huge demands, like that gap is just too far for them to achieve that. You essentially have to put the demand just above their skill level where it's attainable, but it's still slightly out of reach. So you're asking for a change in the human body, but you're not asking for a huge dramatic change. Like you're saying, throw the whole cow at them. I think like what you're saying with this blending and what we do at Kova is we put what we're asking is just out of the reach of what the athlete's skill is. And then they get there. And then right when they get there, we move it up just a touch. We make it a little bit harder, and we make it a little bit harder for them and make them move it a little bit faster, or make them acquire that skill in a different manner. And we just keep doing that. We keep raising the bar until they kind of like they're chasing it. And now all of a sudden they look back and they've made this huge gain. But with that being said, I think that goes into another subject that we always have an issue with at Kova, and that is accountability. A lot of these kids, and we talked about this the other day on the phone as well. A lot of these kids, we live in this like instant gratification society. You hit a microwave button and you get your food in 30 seconds. You are on TikTok or Instagram and you're scrolling and you're getting these mini micro dopamine dumps and you're instantly gratified. And you're on YouTube and you can just pull up another video and laugh, and you're just constantly being stimulated and constantly getting this dopamine dump. And then they come into Kova and they expect a 10-mile-an-hour gain because they saw their boy that we posted about. We made a cool Instagram post where their boy made a 10-mile-an-hour gain, and they think it's just like a cakewalk. They come in the door and they should get 10 miles an hour. And it's not like that at all. And it is very easy to portray it that way on Instagram. It is. You cut a video, bam, now look at this. And look at this kid, how good he's moving. And you see that everywhere. And I think a lot of kids don't understand, a lot of parents don't understand that it is a process. And not only that, it's an accountability process. And like, we will give you drills and different things to work on, but you got to own it yourself. Like a lot of kids, they do one throw and turn around. Hey coach, how was that? It's like, dude, you just did one throw. Like, sure, you did it great.
Yeah.
Let's do that 50 more times. And now then we can talk, and I like to say at Kova is you got 10 throws and say, right when you get here, you do one right. You do the drill right one time. That's okay. Don't be upset with that. Let's just try to do it right 2 times. Let's do it right 2 out of 10 times. Great. You did it 2 times. Let's do it right 3 out of 10 times. And I think that process of just always trying to get one rep better. And now you are like, oh man, now I'm doing it like 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times. Hey, look, I just did that drill perfect all 10 times. And that is when we upgrade them. We make it harder for them. We give them a new drill. And I think the kids that really buy into that process where they are rep by rep, constantly like kind of self-scanning and like, what did I just do there? Instead of always looking for external feedback. Can I see video of that? How did you think I looked? What did that look like? I think when they're self-scanning, those are the best kids that we see the fastest adjustments to, and the kids that have the best gains.
100%. Yeah. And with that process that you said, where it's like they can retain this much information and we give them this much, it's just the adaptation process, and we're going to ever evolve. It's the same thing. So And that goes into cueing too, not just drill work. Like when I'm cueing a guy, that's over coaching. Like I'm giving them way too much information. I want to be right there, and I always play with that line. And then I go here, and I notice it's too much. I come back down,
Yep.
right? And that's with the cues. If it's getting really specific with the positioning that they're getting in, yeah. Kind of going back to some of the blending implementations. Like I said, with the squat, like I as a coach have learned this over time. We're not trying to just get good at drills. And mistake that I would make in the past was I needed to have like this perfect
Hmm.
drill. And now I can use any drill in the book and get a kid
Yeah.
better. It's not the drill; it's the implementation of the drill. It's the understanding of the drill from the
Hmm.
athlete, and it's the cueing from the coach inside of the drill.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
and that can be for
the
anything.
focus within the drill.
Yeah, and then and the athlete accountability, like you said as well, that's spot on. Um, they trust us. They've seen guys come in and get gains. So when they come in, they get an assessment, and I see where their lowest hanging fruit is. I'm gonna attack that, and I tell them that. I say, hey, this is what you're struggling with. Here's some drills and some primers and some strength exercises that are going to help you execute this better. And it may be this huge project that we got in a guy that he has a bunch of different movement efficiencies, but we're going to focus kind of on one thing, because if we try to hit every single thing, there's the time of him getting better it takes
Yep.
too long.
You're just getting marginally
You know
better
what I'm
on four
saying?
things instead of mastering one.
Exactly. And then with the blending, like say that they get arm action, right? And then like they're right here with the arm action, and then I start to cue their lower half, like whether it's their drift and momentum or their loading pattern in their back leg. Then like I'm going here with them, and sometimes on day one guys can get the arm
Yeah.
action on day
Yeah.
one, they can get it, and then I'll start throwing lower half stuff at them. But then I start to see that resistance from the athlete, and I know that I'm it's just not going to happen
Yeah.
today. And that's another thing that at Kova that works so well is we get guys consistently. So I know I don't have to make a big leaguer in a day. I know that this kid's coming in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week, and I can take my time because it's not going to happen overnight. Like you said, a lot of these kids see Tread Athletics and Velo U and all the big
Hmm.
pages, Driveline, Baseball Ranch, and they see these guys making gains, but they don't see the process behind it,
100%.
right? And it's the same thing as coaches on social media too will put this huge front up, like, oh yeah, like we get these kids better, but it ain't like that every day.
No.
It's real life. Training is real life.
Yep.
As a coach, I don't care how good of a coach you are, you're going to get a kid that you struggle with. You're going to get a kid that you struggle with, and you're going to have to adapt. And if you don't get better. You stagnate. And that's a good thing for me. I'm going to be selfish, talk about myself here. Like you said, I get guys that are way down low on the skill side, and I get guys that are super high. So my variability of coaching, it's a massive gap, like from a 10-year-old to a professional baseball
Yeah.
player. And then I'm coaching on each side of those spectrums, and then in the middle as well for a decent high school player. I learn what works and what doesn't work when it comes to cueing and drill selection really fast. So it's a big help for me with the guys that I do get an opportunity to
Yeah.
work with.
I think that makes you a better coach. We have guys in our gym from, like you said, 10 years old to we have a guy with myself, and we have another guy in the big league, Zach Thompson, that you worked with the entire offseason. So I think it's really cool that your coaching ability can scale to the situation as well. And that's not easy to do. Speaking of youth, let's jump there just real quick before we go into lifting. Some of our youth parents think that they walk in there and they're used to kind of want to touch on, I want you to touch on two things here. One, they're used to the lesson model, the one-on-one over verbal abuse cue. So I use abuse, but like a lot, verbal cue.
Shit
Yeah,
is,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
verbal cueing, just spewing verbal cues to the kid. And, some of these youth parents think their kids just aren't doing enough. They see what we do and it's very different. It's against what they've seen and what they're used to. So what's the most important thing, not only when it comes to strength training, but just like also skill acquisition for the youth, such as like hitting and pitching, skill acquisition totally.
Yeah, really think a big thing with the youth guys is having them work on stuff without them even knowing about it, if that makes sense. Like you want to limit the verbal cueing. You do need to verbally cue the kids, but you want to limit the verbal cueing. And I'm talking about in the moment getting a guy better. Now, when it comes to the system and the process that we use, it's completely different from most people that go and look for help at, for their 9, 10, 11-year-old. And I tell parents every time they come in, whenever I get a 10-year-old, they want to come in and they want him to have 4 pitches that he can throw for a strike so he can go out and win plastic trophies. And
when you put it
and
like
I'm
that,
not
it's
in the business of
ridiculous.
doing that. But that's how it is, and I don't blame the parents. They just don't know, and that's cool. And I do my best to not be rude about it. I try to educate them, and I'm like, look, at the end of the day, your kid's 10 years old. He needs to be good in 5 or 6 years. And their eyes open. They're like, no, I want to be like I see, like I want him to be better now. It's like he's gonna get better, but we have to build a foundation. It's just like with strength training. I'm not gonna take an 8-year-old and have him do max effort work, right? I'm not gonna do that. No. Like I need to build a good foundation of strength in every movement. Talk about like GPP with strength conditioning. I want them to be able to do everything at a high capacity. And then we build specifics from that. It's the same thing with throwing. So with the youth guys, we typically, there's a lack of stability with a lot of the youth guys. They can't control themselves in their movement because for one, they're not strong, and two, they just don't know what their body's doing in space.
Yeah.
So we use a lot of water bags with the youth guys to get them stable. And we try to make it fun for them. They're not throwing a ball. So when you take the ball out of the hand, it helps a lot. Like they're doing water bags. It's a little bit different. It's challenging. It builds their conditioning up. But really, at the end of the day, I want to build stability with a youth athlete. And whenever you use water balls or water bags, it creates instability. So whenever they get to that, consistent environment with their body weight on a mound, there's not a ton of chaos like it is with the water ball, and they can control their movements. And we see youth guys, they come in once a week and they go up like a mile an hour, 2 miles an hour a week. It's dumb.
Yeah.
And not only that, with the youth guys, I know that they're going to pitch. So we also address command. I don't address a ton of I don't need a youth pitcher to have 4 pitches.
No.
And if that's what you want, don't come to Kova.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
100%.
We're going to build a foundation of movement, and we're going to get you to pound the strike zone because you're moving efficiently, and we're going to get you to move your fastball around. So we'll play command games. So for example, we'll have like a group of 3 youth pitchers. We'll have a mini mound set up at 50 feet, and we'll have a target with different colors and numbers. And from there, they'll play knockout. So they get on the mound, they come set, and they call a 3, right? And they try to smoke the 3. And typically what you'll see is when they start, their misses are huge. And then at the end of that bullpen after 15 pitches, they're not perfect, but the misses start to shrink and they start to be kind of around that target. And then from there, I'll teach them like, hey, you're going to the 4. It's outside to a righty. If you go to the 4, you miss on that side. That's just and then they learn like, okay, I'm going away. So like I need to get it away. And then over time they learn how to command the ball. And if they do that for 3 or 4 years, boom, you get a 15-year-old that throws hard, has a good foundation of movement, and he can put the ball where he wants it.
Yeah, 100%. And these kids have their neuroplasticity is just like ridiculous. And we actually, with our interns, we touch a little bit on neuroplasticity and how that works and how skill acquisitions within that and the myelin sheath and so we touch on that. And I think the younger kids have this very fast skill acquisition because 1, we're gamifying it. We're making it fun. 2, I'll use what Driveline says. We attack skills that scale. I love that saying. I think that's great because we attack what's important. We play the long game. Like you said, going for plastic trophies is fun. I love competition, but let's do it in a manner that is actually going to get them better in the long term because something that my dad always said is like high school is 4 years. It is like running a mile on a track. You're a freshman and sophomore year. It's cool. If you're in the lead, that's great. Let's focus on try to staying in the lead. But if you're not in the lead, that's okay. Like the most important laps are your 3rd and 4th lap. So let's maybe take a step off the track so they can work on something so that we can be winners at the end of this mile race. And youth athletes especially have so much time, and parents don't want to look at it like that. They're like, I want my kid to win right now. And that's okay. We want your kid to be a winner too, just in like 4 or 5 years. So with that being said, now we kind of touched on youth. Let's jump on why baseball players should lift. And me and you both have heard, I don't want to name any names, but we've heard people say things like, well, they shouldn't lift. That's not how you acquire skill. The skill of throwing is throwing, and has nothing to do with the weight room. We've also seen the other end of the spectrum where uneducated high school players will go into the weight room and do powerlifting stuff, just trying to get big and jacked. And there's definitely a balance there. I think you should be big and strong, and like you need to be in a position that's mobile and it can hit a lot of good positioning. But there's also, I don't think you should just do mobility or just be stretching. And then like your muscles are force absorbers and force producers, and they protect your ligaments and your tendons. And so from there, I'll let you take that away.
Yeah. So, I mean, typically what you'll hear in the industry is either baseball players shouldn't lift or they should lift in a very specific manner. And a lot of the times that's not the case. I want to give this visual to other coaches watching this. So most important thing for us by far is proficiency in the skill, whether that's throwing or hitting. That is the most important thing, and we're not going to argue that. Like, we know that you have to be very proficient in what you're doing. But at the same time, if you think about it like this, say we do everything perfect and we get to a certain level of proficiency where it's a pretty much capped out, where this guy can't move any better, right? And say that guy weighs 160 pounds and he throws 86 miles an hour. Are we just going to call it a day? Because he's throwing it? No. That guy's got to throw over 90 if he wants to play for a while, right? So what do we do from there? We increase the capacity of the organism performing the skill. And how do we do that? In the weight room with maximal effort work, dynamic effort work, and a good amount of variation. And I say variation because we are not training power lifters. If I'm training a power lifter, what's the goal? To get a good bench, a good squat, and a good deadlift, right? Those are movements, right? That's the top of the food chain for me. I want to train those movements. The movements that we're training are throwing and hitting, or throwing and swinging.
Yep.
Right? So in the weight room, if I'm training to have a good bench, I need to train movements that are going to build that bench. It's the same thing with what movements am I going to train in the weight room that are going to build my throw. And you don't want to get ultra specific there, right? So that's why we do a little bit of everything. Now, that's going to be, we're going to bench, we're going to squat, and we're going to deadlift, but we're going to have a really good amount of variation where we're loading the pelvis in different angles. We're loading the upper body, the scap in different angles, being able to move and load all movement, reciprocal movement, or just sagittal plane movement, right? Because that movement that we're performing in the weight room, it doesn't matter how specific it is, because we're going to take those same muscles and that same soft tissue into the skill. Yeah. It's the same thing, whether I'm training it sagittally or I'm not. So if I can increase the capacity of, let's say, for example, my bicep, right? Everyone knows that the bicep is the decelerator of the arm into ball release, right? And I'll tell you something that I've seen over time is guys that have weak biceps have bicep pain. And it happens over and over, and I've seen it 100 times. Guys that have weak biceps have bicep pain. What does that tell me? If I want to think of this in a logical way, right? Because I can tell you what I do. I pick up a ball with a fully torn UCL and I can throw it 100 miles an hour. Have you seen my bicep? My right bicep is very strong. It's large and it can produce and absorb force, like you were saying. So why don't we do that? Let's not put a label on what guys are doing in the weight room. I'm over it, because we can literally change. We can change a kid's life with stuff that we're addressing in the weight room. Let's not avoid it, right? And then the bench press too. Like, that's another big, like, pitcher shouldn't bench. It's bad for the shoulders. How is it bad for the shoulders? It's only bad if I'm training to have a big bench. right? Because if I'm training to have a big bench, I'm going to train movements that increase my bench. Just benching, you're stimulating the pec, you're stimulating the lats.
One thing that I
That's all you're
that's
doing.
brought up a lot with the bench press in particular, on the barbell bench, barbell bench in particular, is that you're getting a ton of internal rotation as you're going down, and especially at the end range. Some people say that's bad. What do you think about that?
Yeah, if you know what's bad, throwing a ball 100 miles an hour and getting the end range there and not
True.
having any capacity. That's bad. Now, I know there's some really smart people that can negate that with like, well, whenever I'm internally rotating and pronating into ball release, it's at a high velocity, right? That's why we do
Yep.
dynamic effort work too, right? And then we don't want to stress the same tissue in the same manner over and over again because we're already doing that in our skill. That's why you have to have variation in your lifting. So, for example, I'm not just going to do standard barbell bench. I'm going to do neutral grip. I'm going to do close grip neutral. I'm going to do wide grip neutral. I'm going to do bands, chains. I'm going to go wide grip barbell, narrow grip barbell. I'm going to change the lift. And from a powerlifting perspective, that's not optimal to build a big bench, right? But we're not powerlifters. We're baseball players, and all we're trying to do is increase the capacity of the person performing the skill. Like I said in the beginning, the most important thing is that we are proficient in the
skill of throwing or the skill of hitting.
So exactly.
Yeah, I remember. I for a while, a few years back, I was a pretty big believer that throwing works your forearm, and so I thought that why would I go into the gym and do more forearm curls or more ring squeezes when I'm going to go out and throw the baseball 100 times in a day, and then I'm going to go in and do more? Like, that makes no sense to me. So balance me on that a little bit. How come I do agree with you?
Yeah.
Throwing a baseball does fatigue your forearm, but why should I go and do more forearms if I'm already doing forearms by throwing?
Yeah, you should, because at the end of the day, you want to increase the capacity of that tissue or that muscle. So if I'm only getting a stimulus from throwing and straining my forearm in that way, I'm going to stagnate. But if I choose other exercises that are either slower or faster in the weight room, for example, wrist rotations, isometrics, maximal isometrics, and or yielding isometrics, you're increasing the capacity. We got to think about it in terms of stimulus. So the more I can stimulate a certain area, the more it's going to adapt. Obviously, I can do too much. So it's just like in the rehab setting. If I do a certain movement that causes me pain, I don't need to push through that. If my forearm is not recovering, maybe after the game I do a little bit of forearm work, but then from there I got to kind of get that soreness and that discomfort out of there. So you have to regulate when and when not to do your forearm work. But you definitely should do forearm work, because at the end of the day, the flexor and pronator mass, those muscles are contracting maximally at ball release to stabilize your elbow joint. So why wouldn't we want to train that, right? And we can get into specificity as well. Like, I do max contract isos, pronation and supination with guys, because that's what's happening. And that's something that's, I've experimented with my training as well, as no UCL guy, being able to throw with a fully torn UCL, training max contract isos of the flexor pronator mass definitely works. And I only know that because even TJ has seen me rip 30 gray plyo balls over 92 miles an hour with a fully torn UCL. And it's because I'm doing the right stuff. And then sometimes as well, I experiment as a coach. Sometimes I do the wrong stuff. Like right now, I'm training like a power lifter, so I don't feel as good when I throw. And what has that done for me as a coach? All it does is reassure that the programming that we're doing inside Kova works. I'm trying to be a power lifter because I'm crazy and I just want to have a big bench and a big squat and a big deadlift.
Because
right?
your skill, you don't have to throw right now. You just want to look great. And that's completely fine.
No.
You can do that as a coach. But I think you're right. By doing the powerlifting stuff lets you kind of like test and be like, okay, I don't feel good as a thrower now because I'm a little too tight across my chest, or my shoulders jacked up because I was going too heavy on bench. Let me make sure I don't program that for my athletes. Yeah, you're 100% right. Going into kind of not feeling good, let's touch on injuries for a second. You were talking about the forearm, and I think the issue why I tore my UCL again was I think the pitch before I strained my flexor and didn't realize it. And like you said, the flexor is a major protector of the UCL. It's contracting maximally, and if I strained it the pitch before I tore my UCL, of course, my flexor was not on and not firing, which all of the load of the next pitch went straight to the UCL and makes sense of why it tore. So let's talk a little bit. What are some of the leading causes for arm injuries in the game?
Yeah. So just going over the real simple ones first. So it's not being prepared for the demands of the sport and what we're asking our body to do. So, for example, giving you an extreme case, if I am only long tossing at 60 to 70% RPE, and I do that over a 4-week period, and I say oh, I did a throwing program, right? And then I show up to my school or my team, and I'm going 30 pitch max effort bullpen. Am I prepared for that? No, I'm not prepared for that because I didn't throw it max effort, and then I'm asking my body to do it. So we want to close the gap there, right? So I got to be prepared, and I think that's one of the leading causes is just a lack of awareness of what the game is going to demand from me and preparing the body for those demands. And it's not complicated. You just use principles like progressive overload, right? And you don't use that just for volume, which that's a big mistake. You use that for intensity as well. So if I don't throw hard and I ask myself to throw hard, there's going to be a super compensation response there. I have to be able to recover from a certain amount of volume and a certain amount of intensity to be able to bounce back from that. So number one for me is just not being prepared.
I completely agree. And I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is when you are for professional athletes, when you show up to spring training and you are throwing in front of the team, you're trying to make a squad, your adrenaline is a little bit higher than what you're doing in the training facility, wherever you're throwing. So say you are exactly, that's where I was going to go. So say you are like, okay, I'm throwing max effort bullpens and no one's around and no one's watching and no one cares. Like, yeah, you're probably actually at like 90, 85, 90%. But at Kova, the environment that we create and the competitive environment that is like there amongst friends and your teammates and stuff, like it's loud. There's music going. We do back slaps. We're trying to raise the stimulus of what these athletes are feeling so that when the game shows up or whenever they're actually competing, it's not even close. Like we've already like exceeded the boundaries of that. And so I think a lot of people try to knock that. Oh, you do back slaps or you do smelling salts. No, we're trying to raise the environment to a position that whenever they go into the game, that's a cakewalk for the kids. That's a cakewalk because they've been stimulated to a level that's so much higher than that, where their boys are screaming at them and they're trying to throw this ball as hard as they possibly can. Now, when they go into the game and they got to throw the pitch actually as hard as they can, that's actually a little bit lower. So now they're training at 100, 110. Now, obviously, we work up to that. We're not like walking them in the door and taking them to the mound and going max effort pull downs or max effort mound stuff. We have to build up to that, like Kibble was saying, progressive overload with volume and intensity. But we do get to a point where we are trying to push that threshold a little bit so that when the game time starts, when you are trying to make a squad, you are ready to rock. You are ready to rock.
100%. 100%. And then this too, like unless you're like a big time back end bullpen guy, you're going to pitch at 90 to 95% anyways. So what's wrong with going in and throwing 100% bullpens and then pitching below those demands? Because then I can go all day. I can throw 90% effort at 5 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour off my peak velocity. Say I throw 98 and I'm 92, 93 with minimal effort, super efficient, and I'm pounding the zone, moving it around, and then boom, here's 97 at the right time.
Exactly,
and that's pitching.
Exactly,
yeah, and that's huge.
If you
another,
I was going to say, and if you don't train at that intensity, you ain't going to be ready to reach back and hit 97.
Nope. So that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to prepare the body, and we do that at Kova. And that was kind of my number one thing. Another leading cause of injury. I'm going to say inefficient movement is another thing too. Like if you're in bad positions while you're throwing, you are going to stress certain structures more versus moving efficiently and dispersing that stress over the entire body. So that's another thing, and we address movement efficiency is by far the number one thing that we address at Kova Sports. My goal is to get guys to throw almost at their peak velocity or at their peak velocity without trying. And it's possible. It's very possible. And that's how it should feel. And then if, like I said, if you are making millions of dollars a year and you are coming out of the back of the bullpen and you got to throw max effort every pitch, we got to prepare for those demands. But at the end of the day, if you're a starter, or even like with TJ, like him coming off of surgery, like I want him to get back to 100, but I want him to be able to go out there and be 96, 98 and just chill. Like, here's this 96, here's this 97. Oh, I got 100 if you want it. Slider, slider, slider. Take a seat. Like, and it's easy. So that's another thing that I want to address real quick on the training is, when we're doing pull downs and we're doing maximal effort throwing, we are training to increase our peak velocity. We're not always going to throw at our peak velocity. So if I can get the peak higher, I can pitch at a more competitive level off of that peak. But kind of going back to the cause of injury, we address movement efficiency, right? And I know this from my experience as well, throwing with a fully torn UCO. I know where my movement inefficiencies are, and whenever I hit those movements and I flow through those movements, I don't feel any pain in my elbow. Whenever my movement's kind of clunky and my loading patterns aren't good, I feel more pain in my elbow. So what's a better example? And I can't think of a better example. Like I'm in real time, throw to throw, feeling what works and what doesn't work. So movement efficiency is going to be the second big thing for me.
Movement efficiency, structural, like soft tissue work, proprioception of movements, which kind of goes into movement efficiency, also goes into the structure of spreading out the stress of throwing. It all matters. And, that's why lifting is very important. That's why post-throw forearm work is very important. Recovery stuff, getting blood flow back into the area, restoring ranges of motion, increasing blood flow to the area. That's why icing is bad for you post-throw. If you don't believe us, like we could totally go on a whole tangent.
Look at the studies.
Movement efficiency. That's great. I think you nailed that.
I got one more thing. Going into the weight room, number 3 is just a lack of capacity of the muscles or the soft tissue. In the weight room, we can specifically train those. For example, if I'm trying to build a big bench, I need big triceps, right? So I'm going to train my triceps and I'm going to get my triceps strong and they're going to be able to produce force. On the throwing side, I know that my forearm has to maximally contract on each throw to stabilize my elbow joint. So guess what? I'm going to specifically train that. Guess what? My bicep eccentrically loads at ball release at high velocities. Guess what? I'm going to train that in the weight room and I'm going to increase capacity, right? My shoulder reaches maximum external rotation or maximum internal rotation at very high speeds. So I'm going to train those at slow speeds to get strong there, right? So another thing is just weakness. It's good to be strong, right? It's good to be strong. And it doesn't mean that we're bodybuilders. It means we're training muscles to increase capacity. I would love to have someone on the podcast, kind of debate that with me. I really would, because it doesn't make any sense to me that people would bash strength conditioning work when we already know our bodies are going to adapt to the demands placed on it. So why would I not increase the demands of my elbow and my shoulder?
Even with that, you can look back at just even the professional level, and every single year, the pitchers are throwing harder and harder. The average fastball is increasing, and that just goes to show that the lifting and the training that we're doing matters. That's why raising the threshold, raising the capacity matters, because dude, like going back to when we were in high school, if you were like hitting 90 and you were like 90, 93, you were a dude. Like you were a dude, like big time name, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Like that was a cool thing. Bro, like you look around, Lake Ridge High School has 5 guys throwing 90 plus. Like, what is that? Legacy High School, like 4 or 5 dudes throwing 90 plus. Like that is completely unheard of.
Yep.
Now, granted, all those kids train with us, and there's a little rhyme and reason behind that, so they know what they're doing. But yeah, man, it's super cool. So that was great. I do want to do a little speed round with you before we finish. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Right. We'll try and keep this as quick as possible. Try not to think, just go straight off the dome. You ready? For these first 2, we're going to go you as a coach for the athlete. Ready? Athlete. This is a pitcher athlete. Single favorite lift. Go.
All of them.
Least favorite lift.
Front squats.
Most favorite lift for yourself.
Deadlifts.
Least favorite lift for yourself.
Front squats.
Guy hates front squats. Most important lift for the majority of athletes that come into Kova.
Deadlifts.
What do you think athletes at Kova most hated thing to do at Kova is?
ISOs.
Any ISOs in particular?
Lunge ISOs, push-up ISOs.
Anytime I get them on the fan bike too.
Or fan bike, yep.
What's your favorite part of the delivery? The favorite part of the delivery to teach?
Hip rotation.
Hip rotation. How long have you been coaching?
8 years.
That was a tough one. That was probably the hardest question. Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
wait, when did I start coaching?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. No, dude, I appreciate your time today. As always, guys, if you enjoyed that, please subscribe, like this video. We'll be producing them every week or so until we run out of topics to talk about. Also, we have a lot of content. Check our link in our bio, our Linktree account. We have in-season throwing guides, hitting guides, pivot pickoff guides. We have a free trial for lifting. We have a whole lot of stuff. And if you're just interested in like want to know more, or like want to know what we think about a specific thing, dude, shoot us a message. Like we'll be happy to like talk about it. I hope that we can help educate you as well as like, you know, if you have something that rebuttals this, like bring it to us. Like we'd love to hear it. We're always open to learning. And that's one thing that I think what makes us great coaches is we're always open to learning new topics and getting better all around as coaches. I by no means think we are the best coaches in the world, but I think that makes us some of the top coaches in the world because we care. We want to get better. We want to improve as coaches. So thank you guys for your time today. Enjoy your day. Get after it in the weight room. Get after it at the field. Always be the hardest worker. And come see us at Kova Sports. The Gorilla's ready to see us. Hey, show them your gorilla tat real quick. Show the boys the gorilla tat.
Ooh.
God, that thing's sick. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.